So recording on. What we're going to do today is what we often do with the calls is go ahead and have a little bit of room for announcements. First, the hydrography program, the USGS National Hydrography Program, and I'm not sure who's on here for the program. I know Steve, you're here. I know if other folks are on too, but we can start with any announcements from the program we'd like to cover. And hello, Steve, there you are.
Hey, Drew. Yep, right here. I'll just mention two things. First off, if you haven't checked out the new hydro addressing tool, HydroAdd, I'd recommend you do that. That's, I mean, HEM was great, but this is way easier than HEM. A great way to get data referenced to the NHD or the NHD Plus. Also, we're continuing to work on the call for action, and that'll be out here in coming months. And I think with that, I'll leave it to you.
Hey, thank you very much. Okay, what I'm going to do now is have a couple of relatively brief presentations, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And okay. So that screen, I'm now going to, now, are you able to see something on here? You see my a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. What I'm going to do today is cover a couple of presentations that came up in the last couple of weeks. AWRA, American Water Resources Association, Geospatial Water Technology Conference, held in Austin, Texas, about 2 weeks ago. And this is something we had signed up for a while back, and we finally had the conference 2 weeks ago. I thought it went very, very well. What I'm going to do today is briefly cover two of the presentations that USGS had given out of many there. Quite a few were offered. However, I need to limit it a little bit. So I'm going to start with something called What's Happening with National Hydrography. And this kind of goes well with what Steve was saying. You know, where are we going with the program? What are the major things that are happening? So we covered several different topics here. I will say, though, that there are a lot of other folks, both within our group here and with other parts of the agency that were at the conference. So there's quite a bit of content out there, and I'm happy to share a copy of the agenda, you know, after this, so you can catch up with things. So what I wanted to do today is cover two of these. One is what's happening with National Hydrography Dataset Plus High Resolution. Karen gave that presentation. I'll cover it today briefly since I'm recently familiar with it. And I think you're on here, Karen, so please feel free to jump in with any clarifications as needed. And I'll cover one that I gave on what's happening with elevation-derived hydrography pilot projects. You can see there are a couple others here. Kim Jones gave a presentation for WBD. Stephen H.L. gave a presentation on Alaska. I think we can save some of the Alaska discussions for further community call. Same with WBD. There should be some new stuff to share with WBD relatively soon, I hope. And so what I thought I'd do today, just briefly cover these two presentations here. Without any further ado, and again, Karen, please feel free to jump in, but I know Karen was out last week, so I wanted to out of the office, and so what I wanted to do was just kind of cover this quickly for her, and go over NHD plus HR, which most people here are probably familiar with, but we'll go ahead and cover it and ensure everyone's up to speed. So agenda on this presentation: NHD plus high resolution overview, data improvements, meaning how do you improve the data within NHD plus high resolution, and then some things that are coming soon. Okay, so how do we get to NHD plus high resolution? Well, we use current USGS geography data sets. We're beginning with the NHD, which is the the surface water component of hydrography, flow lines, water bodies, connectors, artificial paths. Again, this is the surface water network for the country. We have the watershed boundary data set, WBD, watersheds, of course, a nested hierarchical system of nested watersheds within the country. Larger river basins being subdivided into smaller and smaller subsequent basins, as you can see here in the graphic. And what we do is we take a copy of this, a copy of the NHD as it exists now, a copy of WBD as it exists now. Combine that with some other data, which is elevation, which I'll get into in just a moment, and we get NHD plus high resolution. High resolution because it's a 1 to 24K or better NHD, and WBD, mainly the NHD, as its basis, NHD plus HR. So the data, as we're all probably aware, have many, many uses. There's also different types of access for it, which we'll cover in a second. Technical uses, we use it a lot for GIS Carto, web applications, environmental modeling, across the agency with many folks in the state and other federal agencies too, who would be using the NHD plus HR. Access, you're able to download it. We have web-based map services, which we'll get to in just a moment. And so going a little bit further into this, looking at the National Hydrography Dataset, and it kind of goes with what Steve said about HydroAD, is kind of bringing in a network here and being able to converse with it, to relate to it. And so we look at the NHD as, again, the National Drainage Network with rivers, streams, canals, ponds, etc. And from here, we can relate to that. We have reach codes. We're able to generate a location on there. How far along the reach code are you? And this can serve as an address. The same way you have a street address, you have a road, and you can relate either a parcel, say, to it, or even a GPS location somewhere along a road and relate to that. And that's what works here with National Hydro Dataset. It's also really the basis behind the HydroAD. So with the watershed boundary data set, we covered that a little bit before. Again, it's a nested hierarchical group, defines all or part of the area extensive surface water drainage to a point, or in other words, a watershed. And you can see the same graphic we showed here. In a way, this is a bit analogous to zip codes, or it could be to, say, census blocks and tracts. There's another way to look at it too. Okay, so what do we get here? Well, again, we incorporate pieces of NHD WBD, and now we add elevation to this to get the kind of network hydro framework for the whole landscape. Okay, so again, we're getting a copy of the vector data, and now we're adding in the raster data. Okay, so we're burning in, I think that's a term that's been used in the past, the other data that we have, the vector data, into the 3D surface. And a couple big things to note about this. Here we're getting some extra value-added attribution that you can see listed here. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of stuff provided with this in new tables. Some of these can be used for analysis of the hydro layer. Some of these can be used for navigation around it. Where does the stream start? Where does it go? How does it diverge, for example? So many value-added attributes. I believe there's about 25 or so. And then we have rasters. Okay, if you take the digital elevation model, you burn the vectors into that, you get a number of derivative products here. And they show, for example, flow direction grids, flow accumulation rasters. I can point out one thing. I was at a conference a few years ago where we had this highlighted. The NHD Plus was one of the highlights at a booth, and many people were asking about the raster data. They wanted the raster data, which is provided, but that was a key focus area, which I was surprised to see. It was good to see that. NHD Plus HR availability, it has been completed with the continental U.S., Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and the territories. So we're working into an update process. This map here is dated about a month ago, so it should be reasonably up to date. I don't know the fine print on what may have been completed or added to the national picture in the last month, but this should be pretty close to what we have available. Okay, so you can see that here's the update in production now in these tan areas. Available products and services. So it's available at a couple of the different HUC levels for the continental U.S. We would HUC 4 and 8 at the continental U.S. and 8 in Alaska. Again, vectors and rasters are provided together. We also have that it's available as a web service. Okay, we'll get to that in just a second too. Looking at this is just the picture here that kind of lumps them together of accessing our products. A little more detail here. There's a couple sites here that go very, very well together. First, you have the National Map Viewer, used to be called the Advanced Viewer. And again, this lets you look at the data to see it. What is in the NHD now? Okay, what do we have in transportation? What do we have in the names? Other things that we serve up as part of the national map, people are able to take a look at this. Okay, so you get to look at the data, and then if you like it and need it, you can download it. This leads directly to the downloader site. You can see right here, you can't probably see that, but right there you can click data download. You can go from looking at the data to downloading it. And so all our layers can be downloaded, of course, including NHD, WBD, and NHD plus HR. Okay, before we go to the next slide, you can see that we have another button up here for the map services. So you can go again from looking at the data to either getting it as a download or viewing it as a service. Okay, and here's the services list. There's quite a few of them. The National Map Services, again, serving all of the base map themes that National Map supports, and there's quite a few of them. To find the service that we need here, go to Theme Overlays, right here. Then within here, you can see a number of selections at the top. We have the NHD plus HR service right here. Okay, so you're able to access that, and again work with the data through a service. And of course, there's all the other ones in here: NHD, elevation, transportation, the small scale data sets, etc. Okay, so what we'll do now is have a quick look at some of the enhancements, the ways we can enhance the data. So again, getting back to how NHD Plus is made, it's made from a copy of NHD, WBD, and add in elevation. So goes to say that if you were to improve the NHD, improve the WBD, that would improve, of course, NHD Plus HR. So we're now adding 3DEP. Okay, 3D elevation program, IFSAR in Alaska, LIDAR for the continental U.S. state. Let's see, and the territory too in Hawaii, of course. Adding this, but also looking at another step in here, which probably everybody is familiar with, is deriving features from elevation for an update. In other words, improving and updating your NHD and your WBD. So the vector components are being improved. And suffice it to say that the 3DEP itself can be improved, right? And it's also included in the resulting NHD plus HR. So because it's a copy of it, as those data sets improve, so do we improve the NHD plus product. Another thing, this is interesting, I didn't know this, but it was interesting to learn this when I saw the presentation. Okay, data improvements for known issues. In a case on the first round of NHD plus HR, excessive sinks and off-network water bodies resulted in many catchments. You may not be able to see the little yellow lines here, but these showed where sinks were popping up. And this caused, because it would then say, well, where does the water go to? It goes to the sink. And thus you have many more smaller catchments or really watersheds than you truly should have. So this shows an example of the known issue. The first few regions produced in CONUS, and it had an excessive number of sinks in off-network water bodies. Okay, and this resulted in additional catchments again, or a catchment really an area that drains to a point, in this case a sink, that were not needed. So you had many more of these small watersheds that could be removed by taking care of the excess sink placement. Another thing that's a good way to improve NHG plus HR is flow estimates. I should have neglected to say when looking at the VAA's value added attribution that we also have flow, right? Water flow along the network, and so that's provided from weather data that we have been using over the years, and the really weather and gauge records for a certain time span. And at first, we were using a 30-year record from the early 70s to 2000. So recently, I made a big change here to the DayMet data set. You can see the link here, Oak Ridge National Labs, which is now moved it up 20 years, 1990 to 2019. Much better and improved results too. Okay, so this will really affect what we see in some of the value added attribution. Another thing to do is, again, another way to improve the data really that's behind the NHD Plus is through a new crowdsourcing improvement. The markup application it's been out there for several years for folks to submit updates to the NHD. This is supposed to be ready to use, easy to use for users to make a quick update, to annotate something, say, oh, this needs to change. And this is how people are able to access it through the application right here. You can see a little screen grab of some of those that are in the system, or at least recently were. I've had some personal experience myself using this, adding some of the suggested edits in the Arizona area. It's worked well. I've also gone in there and tried to fix a few of these too, going through the queues to update some of this. So it's worked well and a great way to help improve NHG and WBD. Another way to improve the data is looking at the formatting. GeoPackage is a new standards-based platform-independent format. Okay, so thus it supports the Geospatial Data Act, and we've just begun to make this available for Sage products in April last month. I know that Annalisa Stacy gave a presentation on this on our January 22 call. So we have a recording of that, and I can always point people to that recording. I also know that our California steward has been working a lot with the GeoPackage data for her needs and her group's needs too. So that's another one. So the final topic here was anything coming soon. So what's coming soon? Well, we have the web map service. We have Stage products. We will have some Stage products and the persistent USGS digital object identifier coming soon. We expect to have a release on this in the summer. We also, I'm hoping to have this as a topic on an upcoming hydrography community call this summer or this fall. So that'll be something that's, speaking of coming soon. Hydro addressing. Steve mentioned this earlier, the Hydro Add tool. Again, it allows you to tie locations along a flow line the way you might be alongside a road, right? You can access information about the road you're near. You can do the same thing here with our network. You have addressing, you have the tool that helps accomplish that. Michael Tinker gave a presentation on this in our December 2021 call, so that's available too. And here's the link. This is something that's going to be really in our vocabulary for a long time as both the NHG improves and again, people are able to relate their local data that may have anything to do, well, it needs to be, right now at least, it needs to be near the hydro features and can be brought in. If this is a site of interest, is it a project you're working on, is it infrastructure, it's construction, etc., those things can be linked to the network. Okay, so that was abrupt ending, but here we're at the end. And Karen, again, gave this presentation originally. I think she's on the call too, but this is a great time to have any questions that pop up. I could try to answer them, and hopefully Karen or the other hydro folks can jump in too. So any questions?
And I'm here, Drew.
Oh, hello. Hello. I hope I did this well. So
Great.
okay.
There was one item I did want to clarify back on the 2 slides back on the national. That's a national, right
Here.
now, the next one back, yeah, that one. The national NHD plus HR, it's for everything that we have available for the nation right now. Currently, it's only available as a web service. So that stage product will be coming soon. And it will have additional tables that are not in the web service, and that will be the only product at this time with the digital object identifier. We do expect to issue that maybe annually, but we're working on getting that first one out. So we'll keep everyone posted on that.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, hi, this is Al Ray. I just wanted to further clarify what Karen just mentioned about the national. It's one giant database, one giant geodatabase for the whole country, and everything is in there. All of the attributes are updated so that they are consistent nationally. When we released the data originally, as we were processing the country, going through it for the beta products, some of those attributes had to have temporary values. And so those attributes have all been updated so that they're consistent in the national context. And that's what's in that web map service and will be in this national data set. Just it can be a little confusing, but those some of those some of those attributes, we've had questions about them. You know, it's things like path length, which tells you how far it is down to the end of the network. Well, because we process the data starting in the headwaters and moving our way down, that didn't have the information about going all the way down the network to the ocean. So those have all been updated in the web service and the new national data set, which will be coming soon.
Thanks, Al.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think without any further ado, I will switch gears to the second presentation here on the pilot projects. Let's see, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Okay, you can see me there. Okay. Here we go. Take me a minute to switch to the next presentation. Oh, there we go. Okay. What I'm going to do is now share my screen. There it is. Hopefully you can see that. And now I'm going to start the presentation. Okay. Now, the other thing we did with what's happening that we're showing today, at least, is what's happening with elevation-derived hydrography pilot projects. Okay, and this is what I showed at the AWRA, as we mentioned before, but it's not the whole story. There have been other pilot projects up in Alaska. There's been some done in 2016. I have a slide or two on that, but I wanted to point out that there's more to this, and Steve H.L. had given a great and more broadly focused call on the pilot projects at the NICHIC forum last week. So I believe they have a recording of that. I'm not sure if it's out yet, but that's another thing to look at too, for kind of a different picture, a broader picture of the pilot projects. So EDH and NHD. Going back a little bit in time here, we go to the hydrography requirements benefit study, which I remember well, which documents the need for improved hydrography and how can you do that? Well, you can align it with elevation, right, with the detail afforded to you from the elevation data. So this includes, again, merging 3-depth LiDAR and IFSAR, as mentioned before in the last presentation. And now you have z-values on the vertices. You have a lot more information available. You can see here, this also talks a little bit about some of the pilot projects, CONUS from 2017. It could have been 2016, I'm not sure. Alaska, and again, some here in 2021, which I'll kind of cover today. Again, though, EDH is leading to a lot more data. So how is this going to work? Moving to kind of a future of the 1 meter LiDAR-derived hydro. What is that going to mean? Well, you can see the number of features nationally could increase, say, 10-fold. And so we need pilot projects to start looking at how to do this and seeing what we can expect as we move down the road here. So some of this is a little bit of a repeat. So we'd be deriving, of course, hydro streams, lakes, hydro units too, using algorithms to process elevation data that identifies the channels and depressions, right, that carry surface flow. So there are a number of different ways to do that, a lot of algorithms out there. What do you choose from? What works best in different terrain, et cetera. For example, how far enough to headwater areas, where the bridges and culverts. So it's going to be a lot of things to look at. And so again, the need for the pilot projects is pretty apparent. Another thing that will play during these pilot projects and then down the road, of course, in national data development are elevation derivative products. So things that are derived from the source DEM that help us identify the most likely paths of water. Some of these, and look at geomorphon approach, the bot hat channels too, different flow paths, ones that may be single paths or ones that allow divergences. So you have sinks, we mentioned sinks earlier, you have contour lines, you have elevation profiles you can use. So again, numerous things can be derived from the elevation data. Projects now, there are 4 projects I want to mention, different areas of the country. They show different terrain, physiographic regions. We have different partners, area of interest sizes, different contractors, different data generation methodologies. What we're doing is really expressing what we want to see, not how to necessarily get there. A little bit more on that in a second. Different experiences as they work through the data. A couple things to note, though, even though these are different places with different expectations, some things we do kind of hold constant here. We're using our data originating from 3-depth, 3D elevation model DEM. So we want that to be consistently used. Of course, this is CONUS, so it's LiDAR, but we have IFSAR for Alaska, and also a consistent data destination. We want this to get into the National Hydrography Datasets. So the data, at least right now in the current state that we have, would be conflated to the current NHD. So not just deriving lines and polygons, but getting them into the national data set. Okay, so that's a key component to be aware of. Expectations. So again, we're going to be generating elevation-derived hydrography to use to meet data requirements, but not say how we're going to do that. But in what requirements to meet, well, they're described here. Elevation-derived hydrography acquisition specifications, and the elevation-derived hydrography representation, extraction, attribution, and delineation rules, READ rules. These two publications came out, I believe, about a year ago, and they just, for example, the specifications kind of describe what makes up the data, the attribution, the feature codes, topological requirements, metadata, the formatting. READ rules will look more at what are the attribute values, what are the data extraction, okay, how do you, the capture rules, for example. So, and again, importantly, not required to follow any set data extraction procedures. Using 3DEP, inclusive Z values, and then generate elevation-derived hydrography, complete the data again, so it goes into NHD. WBD is included in some of the cases too. And finally, a sample data, or data sample, I should say, would be provided earlier during the project, along with further inspection of the whole data set by USGS. Looking further at these specifications, these are the READ rule documents. And I do need to say I got a lot of help from Christiane Archuleta and Sylvia Terziati, who helped me generate this presentation before AWRA and work on the abstract for it. So I owe them a lot for being able to put this together. And again, here are the links to the pubs. Oh, I did want to point out too, Sylvia was telling me this, that this is going to be changing and moving to a new site with information on these standards, not just a link to a pub that ends there, but similar to the page that we have, the LiDAR-based specifications. In other words, if you go there, yes, you can get specifications, but it also provides links to the older ones. It gives you a list of what changes. So that is going to be occurring to these specifications as well. Okay, they'll be available through a 3DEP-like specification page. So looking at the pilot project areas, there's 4 of them here in a national map. You can see how they're spread out in different spots. Oregon's a little hard to see. Two smaller areas here, I believe Huck 10s in Oregon, with larger projects in Southeast Texas, South Carolina, and Pennsylvania. Overall goals, and by the way, I did borrow a little bit of the prose from Steve's presentation last week, just to change a few of the lines in here, and to bring them up to date a bit. Again, look at data development, different physiographic regions, as you could see on the last slide. South Carolina, Pennsylvania projects, in addition to being pretty large, support stakeholder plans tied to the broader collection, again, of a larger area, perhaps statewide. And emphasis there is on the elevation derivative products like the hydro-enforced DEMs. Okay, all using 3DEP data, delineating the data to get into the National Hydrography Dataset. That's okay to restate that, because that's an important goal. And so again, we're going to delineate all the polygon and linear features. Oregon pilot, starting from west to east, known as the Applegate River Project to Huck 10. That's why they're so hard to see on the map. Smaller areas, only 300 square miles. Status of the work here is how products delivered to USGS under manual inspection now by us. Should be completed this year. WBD is an additional requirement for the work. Partner in this case is the Forest Service. Here they are, zooming in a little closer. This is on the California-Oregon border. Focus on this Huck 10 here, called the Headwaters Applegate River. You can see it's pretty busy. There's a lot of terrain here. We're showing a lot of the the WBD, the Huck 12s, which are quite a few of those, as well as NHD in here. So you can see we'll kind of get an idea of what the terrain looks like here. Going another step further in, okay, Applegate Lake, you can see what's the current NHD here. The extent of the reservoir, extent of the these components here that link up the data, the artificial path, but also really looking at what is the data we already have in NHD and how's it's going to change. What will we be showing? You can see the terrain here. What will we be getting now as we derive this? So that'll be something to see. Texas pilot, it's called Southeast Texas Project. There are 10 Huck 10s here. I've listed them not by number but name. You can kind of get an idea of the environment a little bit from the Huck names. Oyster Bayou, Pine Island Bayou, a little bit about the terrain and where they are, Salt Bayou. So, okay, it's looking like a place here with a lot of water. It's on a coast, a lot of vegetation. So different environment entirely. Much bigger project, a different contractor. I did point out here that they gave a presentation at the at AWRA. Okay, status right now, delivery of delineated hydro and hydro enforced DEM, so the derivative DEMs now in the conflation process, also to be done this year. And it does include WBD and topography too, which is interesting. At the area again, you get an idea of what we're dealing with here. Large extent, low relief, bearing trees and shrub veg, numerous water bodies, wetlands, canals, and flow lines. I'll show a little of that in a second. The NHD, by the way, had already been recently updated for the region, not through elevation-derived methods, but it had been traditionally updated like a Seward would do through other reference data set, aerial photography, and other methods. So it was a very good data set to begin with, and now we're building on that. Taking a look here, a little bit of background information here. You can see the different terrain, see the vegetation here, see the coastal features out to the coast, a large city here, Beaumont, Texas, Port Arthur, Texas, and again, give you an idea of what we're working with here. This is a Huck 8, so it combines, I believe, 3 or so of the smaller Huck 10s, and you get an idea of, again, what we're starting with here. The newly updated NHD, here's NHD in blue, the flow lines, I should say, and the water bodies. In green here are canals. There are a lot of canals here. Okay, so it's a challenging environment from in terms of the features to work with to begin with. See right here, Beaumont, of course, then you have an urban area off to the side. The South Carolina project, Saluda project, again, looking at the names here, you can see Big River dominated, a bigger project, 7,400 square miles. Dewberry is the contractor. They did give a presentation as well at AWRA. And status right now to review the sample data set with completion expected in 2023. So looking at the area here, you can see it is a bigger area. Get an idea of the extent of these, again, the large river dominated basins here with some large lakes as well in this case. As you can see here, it's a broad mix of land uses, urban, rural, agriculture areas, terrain, veg. You've kind of got a coastal and uplands physiography. This can kind of show that. You can see the demarcation here really between kind of the uplands here in northern South Carolina, as well as now more the coastal plain down to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, and again, urban, you have a big urban area here in Columbia. Pennsylvania, we have what's known as a Raystown project, 3 Huck 8s here, a big project, 3,400 square miles. Right now, the status is the delineated elevation-derived hydro and enforced hydro report DEMs have been provided. It's in manual review or inspection by USGS. We can expect it to be complete early next year. and taking a look at the region here. Appalachian Mountains, okay, you can see the ridges and valleys here, and how different these areas are from the areas to the east and west of the site. Karst landscape is also evident here. So that means sinkholes, disappearing streams, isolated networks that come from a karst location. Applying a little imagery, to this, you can see the vegetated areas here. So you have a mixture of ag and heavier vegetation, and throwing the elevation into the mix. Again, you can see the differences in the terrain between more of a river valley here, okay, to the smoother, relatively smoother terrain here to the northwest. And again, working with the ridge and valley complex here. Taking a final look and zooming in gives you a close-up of the existing data that we have today. And again, what will change? What do we see here now in the existing data, and how do we think it'll change as we start to extract data again from elevation? Okay, so to start summarizing, what we had here again is a mix of Huck 8s, Huck 10 units in 4 different environments. What do we want to take from this? What might be the cost for this? What are the technical issues here? Testing is a big thing. How are we going to review the data? What are the workflows for contracting, tools and workflows for inspection and in testing? Okay, all this needs to be worked out. This is a great way to start looking at that. Discussion with the contractors, automated processes, and this is one of the slides I updated from Steve's presentation the other day to make sure I got the right stuff in here. So there is there's a lot that we are going to be taking from this, in addition to the work going on in Alaska and the earlier 2016-17 pilot projects. Next steps, so complete the project, so should be done by next year. Look at the utility, the raster products, again, those are in high demand. The elevation-derived, well, not that, but really the hydro-conditioned, hydro-enforced EEMs. Look at the future direction. Okay. The USGS is managing the work right now through the geospatial products and services contracts. There are other projects out there under contract with other partners, local, regional, state government, stewards, for example, other federal agencies. There's a broad agency announcement of BAA with hydrography coming. It's subject to funding, of course, but that's planned in the future. Look at the experiences of the pilot projects, and again, discussion with the contractors, and look at what elevation-derived data will eventually go into the 3D or hydrography program model to replace or update NHD. Okay. And finally, just to wrap up, this is what I direct people to go look at AWRA during the presentation, our website, newsletter. I did point out when I was there that we had the little, our page at the time was showing good stuff. 3D hydrography program, which we presented that AWRA, the different presentation. Hydro ad, we talked about that already. NHD plus HR, we talked about that too. But things that we were covering there were right there, ready to go on our website. And so that should wrap this up. I'll end with a few more comments of my own. So what I'm doing now is working to pencil in more call material for the rest of the year. So if anyone's interested in presenting on their hydro-related research or topic or job or data set, please let me know. It's open to a wide variety of input. So that could be other AWRA presentations out there, of course, from our program, for the water mission area here at USGS, our partners, our stewards, our data users. So again, we're open to all sorts of presentation material, and I'll be chasing people down to bug them for the rest of the year to try to get them involved in future topics. Also, be prepared for further announcements from the Gov delivery system. We'll be sending out hopefully a new kind of recurring calendar appointment, hopefully longer than 3 or 4 days before the actual event, so you can get it in there, and I'll be sending out more reminders. Again, it'll be coming as an attachment or a link, as opposed to the very convenient way we used to just put it in there as a calendar invite from the get-go. So that'll change a bit. So, and to that note, the next call should be, to mark your calendars right now, is June 21st. So, okay, nothing else. Thank you very much.